Bridger Fates, and welcome to Master Stockman Consulting's supplemental videos on ag research. You know, one of the biggest challenges for ag producers is understanding how, if, or when to implement ag research. We have 5 videos with 5 different research projects from right here in Utah. We'll describe the projects to you, and then we're going to work through the principles that you've learned in the Business Power Tools for Ag videos to be able to analyze these research projects to understand if, when, and how you should implement them. These videos are sponsored and funded through Western SARE, and we appreciate them for their funding. Now, here I am to talk to you about our next research project. The project I wanted to look at today was Grass-Legume pastures to increase economic and environmental sustainability of livestock production. The genesis of this project is really looking at trying to increase productivity in pastures using an approach different than just fertilization. So when we use fertilization, you know that it can be an expensive venture to try and increase our pasture growth and production that way, and it's not necessarily environmentally sustainable. So another option is to interseed grass pastures with legumes like this legume here that I'm holding. So legumes have an ability to affix a nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil and help increase the productivity of our pastures. So I'm standing out here in this pasture here in Ephraim, Utah today. It's a nice day out here in a nice pasture. It's fairly productive. It's got a mix of grasses. It's not just a monoculture, not just a single grass. It's got a mix, and it's a nice mix, but it probably could use some legumes to help improve the productivity. So this research project, they looked at adding a couple of different legumes into these pasture mixes to see if that would help in terms of grass production as well as livestock production. So the mixes that they tested were a fescue grass and alfalfa mix and a fescue grass and bird's foot trefoil mix. What they found was that the fescue grass and bird's foot trefoil mix was actually the most productive when it comes to livestock. So they used steers on these pastures, and the steers gained the best in those bird's foot trefoil and fescue grass pasture mixes. The grass, just the fescue grass alone with applied fertilizer, was actually the most productive in terms of forage production. Although the legume and the grass mix were close in forage production, they still outperformed those single grasses when it comes to livestock production. So I think this is a great project for Utah producers to think about. You know, it's a way to add some production to our pastures, increase the efficiency of our livestock, and do it in an environmentally sustainable way where we're not adding in fertilizer from the outside. So here in a minute, we're going to get together as a group and talk about some of the other issues that might be of importance when you're thinking about a project like this on your own farm or ranch. You know, some of the things like, what would you do to get started? What are some of the basic economic principles behind a project like this? What are some tools we could use to analyze this from an economics perspective to see if it would pay off for us? And, you know, how well did this project really follow that scientific process?
Well, I hope you found that summary video of this project informative. We wanted to talk a little bit about how this might apply to the other tools and concepts that we've talked to you about in these business tools for agriculture videos. So to start us off, Wyatt, can you tell us a little bit about the economics involved in this project?
Yeah, sure, Bridger. Well, you know, with nitrogen fertilizer, we've seen a slow but steady increase in demand over the last several years, and that's expected to continue. Basically, that means we're not going to see really, any significant drops in prices because the demand staying the same, and we kind of have a set supply. So it's good to kind of get some other options to get away from that nitrogen fertilizer, to see if you can kind of offset some of those costs, and be better prepared for the future.
Yeah, I think that's right. Certainly the limitation on some of the fertilizer choices we have over the last few years has really restricted that market and really driving those prices. So, Brian, as we think about, some of these students, as they're thinking about getting involved in agriculture, how might they apply a project like this to something they're thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bridger. So we talked a little bit for getting started about, buying versus leasing. And so, if we're thinking about leasing a property as we're getting started, because that, is going to work the best for us, maybe we try and find a pasture that already has some legumes already mixed in with that plant community in that pasture, instead of just a monoculture of just, one grass species or something. So this might be one way where we can potentially, offset some of that cost for fertilizer, and still have some good plant diversity and some plants that are adding nitrogen back into that system for us. So this would be a great way to get started if we're just new to the situation.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense as a way to get started. And as I thought about this in terms of, if you had a pasture and you really want to get started and doing something like this on one of your own pastures, what would you need to do in terms of an economic analysis or the tools that we have on the Wyoming Ranch Tool site? How would you look at this question? And really it boils down to that partial budget in terms of understanding, the difference in the amount you're going to save with the reduced fertilizer versus those increases in gains on your livestock. Even though you're going to be losing a little forage production without using that fertilizer, this research project really showed that you still got those gains. So that's really the cost that you're looking at, that cost of saving the fertilizer cost, and then does that offset with the livestock gains, and is the offset enough to pay for that reseeding project? So, Hudson, what are some other records that you would need to keep to really be able to do those sorts of analysis on this project?
I think that in this scenario, I think I would look at the records and make it a two-question or a two-part thing. The first one is really establishment of our legume pastures. We might lose some feed the first year establishing these pastures. There might be a cost with interseeding or reseeding a pasture completely. We've really got to look at those costs compared to future savings costs with applying fertilizer and future value of rate of gain on those cattle. And so that's really the first thing we really want to have some records on, and really want to have some information to make good decisions. And I think that the second one really rolls into simple trend analysis. We talk over and over again how important it is to know where we're trending. Are our numbers going up? Are our numbers going down? And what are they doing from year to year to year? And I think that is really the interesting part of these legume pastures. Do these legume pastures stay seeded? Do they stay productive? Will they increase productivity over the years? Do they decrease a little bit? And really that this study showed that in a pasture where we had multiple species for those animals to select from, those animals gain better. And that makes good logical sense. Over the years, we want to watch those animals and see if they will continue to do that, and if it makes economic sense to really have those legume pastures versus just a straight grass pasture. I think looking at those two different things, immediate and then future trend analysis, the way I'd look at record keeping on that.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I hope as you've watched these videos and the other videos in this series that you really start to grasp how important record keeping is and how much more powerful the tools on the website can be when you have accurate records to enter into them. And so I think that's really important on any of the projects. Last thing we want to talk about is how this project sort of followed that scientific method. So Barton, what did you see in this project?
Yeah, Bridger, of the several studies we're looking at in this video series, the authors of this project probably did the best job of following the scientific process, and not just following it, but showing us in the project report how they followed it. So they asked a very specific question. They looked at the available research that would be similar, so a literature review. They developed a hypothesis. They tested it. They evaluated their results. And then they did a great job of presenting their findings in this report. And it's really a great project for not only what they found out, but for replicating and following the scientific process. So it's a good template to use in other projects as well, in terms of developing good research by following the scientific process.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think, for you as students, as you take a look at this project, it is a little daunting. There is some complexity to the results that are presented, but the basis is really fairly easy to grasp, and that's that we can really reduce nitrogen need, add to sustainability of our pastures, and have economic benefit by adding gains on our livestock by thinking about doing these grass-legume pasture mixes. Hopefully you found this discussion helpful as we tied the project to the other tools and concepts that we've already talked about, and hopefully you'll watch the rest of the videos in this series.